Thank you. Can you hear me okay? How is everyone doing?
Good.
It's pretty early on the Friday, but I hope I can warm you up a bit. So I want to talk to you today about designing for hostile environments. And the browser is the most hostile environment I can think of. Douglas Crockford, known for his involvement in JavaScript, recognizes that building stuff in a browser is extremely difficult. It's not an easy task. Browsers are the most hostile software development environment imaginable, he said. And it's because a lot of stuff is out of our control, and stuff often just doesn't work. People using the web don't necessarily understand that browsers are very complicated pieces of software, that they have to deal with lots of difficult problems, that they have to make lots of decisions, that they're built by people and they have their own bugs and so on. They just know that they encounter stuff that doesn't really work for them very frequently. I want to talk about what I mean by stuff doesn't work. We probably have a slightly different preconception of what it is when things don't work. Site doesn't work when I can't complete a task I came there to do. There are many factors that influence whether I can complete a task and I can accomplish it at all. One of the major roadblockers to completing a task that we should always think about when building things is accessibility, which is not necessarily to do with how difficult it is to build stuff in the browser, but is sort of a little bit to do with having a sensibility towards how people actually use the web. It's one of the fundamental factors in preventing people from doing the stuff that they came to the site to do. GovUK pays special attention to building stuff that is accessible because the government obviously needs to serve the whole of society and they make sure that the stuff they build is accessible. I want to talk a bit about one specific case where I think one of the now ex-GovUK developers, Alice Bartlett, took a project and made it much better and much more accessible. Alice was doing improvements to the search interface on GovUK. During testing, she noticed that the improvements she was doing, the enhancements she was doing in order to bring out more relevant search results, she was doing sort of, as you type in your query, new stuff was coming up, and it was much better for regular users, but people using VoiceOver, she realized that it was much worse for them. The field with the new search results was being marked as the active field, and it was being read out every time anything changed. So every time you typed a letter, new results would update, and the VoiceOver would start reading out all of the results from the beginning. Now, before she tried it with VoiceOver, like this improvement sounded like a good idea, but whenever the search results were actually loaded and actually tested, it turned out that it was actually quite annoying. So she found this infuriating, and she went about redesigning the markup. The markup that she redesigned made slightly more sense with VoiceOver. She decided to add a component that would be containing the results count, and only that component would be read out by VoiceOver whenever anything changed. So now instead of reading out a list of incomprehensive results every time you typed something on the screen, it would just alert you that the number of results has changed and that you can use a tab button to move to those results and read them out. So this is the kind of change that would have been impossible to make just by thinking about it. She had to try it to realize that her solution at first wasn't exactly the right solution. So I would urge you to test your designs in using different many modes of input and using different assistive technologies. VoiceOver is probably one of the easiest because if you're a Mac user, it's already available on your computer, so you should use it frequently as part of your testing strategy. There are many other assistive technologies, and knowing a little bit about how they work and like how different input devices work will help you understand a little bit better. Oh, maybe this clickable area is a little bit too small, or maybe it's too close to something else, and people with motor skills might find it difficult to tap the right target and so on. So like testing it helps you develop a sensibility that helps you then use your judgment better in order to prevent things like that. VoiceOver is really, really great. It's really easy to toggle it on and off. If you just learn a few shortcuts, it makes using it much, much easier. And testing with VoiceOver is super, super quick. So anytime you build something new parts of interface, I urge you to use VoiceOver in testing. Another way to prevent people from being able to accomplish the task on the site is to use jargon, language, and tone that they may not be able to understand. Again, example of Gov UK, they think a lot about the language they use. Not all of the visitors to your sites will speak English. Some of them will speak English, but it won't be their first language, and they're all just trying to get stuff done. Unless you have a good reason to use jargon, it's best to stick to plain language. GDS have guidelines about which words and phrases are not acceptable to use because they're difficult to understand, or because they're too vague or too nuanced for people to understand really quickly. And I think an important thing to realize is that it's not only people who don't understand English very well, or people with lower reading age that have difficulty understanding language very quickly. People might be in a rush. They might be feeding a baby. They might be dealing with a difficult situation where somebody died and they're trying to accomplish a task. All of these situations might cause us to parse language in different ways. So using clear language is almost guaranteed to help people accomplish their task. The tone of voice is also important. If the government was speaking in a funny voice, making lots of jokes and trying to be friendly, it might not be necessarily trustworthy, and people think that maybe this isn't actually a government website. By contrast, MailChimp's brand is all about friendliness and having fun, and humor is one of their brand indicators, so the language they use to communicate their values includes that kind of tone of voice, and it's important to their product. Language can be also a tool of exclusion, which is why if you want to build tools or products that are widely used, you have to be careful how you use it. There's been a number of research papers that prove that using certain types of language can exclude vast swathes of society from finding your products accessible. However, here I want to state that using language as an exclusion tool might also help build communities. Whether it's a good thing or not. 4chan users, for example, use language specifically to exclude outsiders, and that helps them foster a sense of community, because only the people in the know will understand all of the in-jokes. So the language barrier is designed there to keep people away and keep only in the people who are the kinds of people that enjoy being part of that community. So while this might be a negative example, it might be also a tool towards building very specific types of communities. However, one of the most important things, I think, is also page size and load time. Huge page sizes and load times will prevent people from accomplishing a task, even if your website is otherwise flawless in every other way. I want to show you the metric I call time to text, which for me is a useful way of thinking about how fast a page loads. Most of the time, as soon as you can start reading, you don't care that stuff is still being loaded, that the images are still appearing, that the video is still loading. You can already start doing your thing most of the time as soon as you see some text. So it's not necessarily about the full load, but like how soon can you start getting to work. Here it is. Here's a video of me loading a Medium post over my home Wi-Fi. That is a Wi-Fi in London, and it takes about 8.1 seconds for the blog post to actually load. A single tweet loaded over 3G at my home takes 8.4 seconds. That's for 140 characters. You can calculate how many milliseconds I need per character of text. Now here's the same tweet stripped of all the things I don't care about and loaded from my own server without any compression, which takes exactly 4 seconds, which is half the time. And you might say that it's a little bit unfair to just load the relevant HTML fragment, no CSS, no JavaScript, and then say it's faster. Well, obviously it's faster. I cut out a lot of stuff. But I want to read the tweet. That's all I care about. I care about the 140 characters, the words and ideas communicated from one mind to another. I don't really care about everything else that comes with it. And you can't make your visitors care about it. Like, nobody else cares about your products as you do. People don't care that, you know, you've made this amazing JavaScript that makes this amazing animation when you tap this button. People really don't care. They just want to get stuff done. Just an example. I took this screenshot on the train, I think now it was years ago. You can see at the top of the phone screenshot that it's searching for network because I temporarily lost it. I was on the overground between stations, but it doesn't really matter. I don't have the CSS, I don't have any images, probably none of the JavaScript trackers have loaded, but I can read the article, and I read it till the end, and the article was quite long, and I enjoyed it. So I was happy, even though I didn't get any of the stuff that designers of the site thought was important. Now, it's easy to assume that if you build stuff aimed at people who work in tech, then like all of these challenges don't really apply to you. After all, everybody has the latest devices, they all have really fast broadband, outside of the house they have 4G, and you don't have to worry about page sizes so much. So I think it's really easy to assume that, but it's not necessarily true. I work in tech, I run my own business, I've worked for startups, and I ran my freelance business for years, and I work from all sorts of places: my home, clients' offices, my own office, co-working spaces, my friends' flats, depending where, where the day takes me. Occasionally it's really sunny, so it's really tempting to work from my garden, and this is a picture taken in my garden one of the really sunny days last year. I have an Airport Express in my room that extends my Wi-Fi range from where the router actually is. It's placed near the window so that I can get much better Wi-Fi in the garden. However, that doesn't mean I get reasonable signal. The signal is actually pretty bad. And every time I work in the garden, I realize that most sites have something against me. Like, they just don't want me to get any stuff done. It's a really painful experience. There are only a few sites that will load reasonably fast, and these are the ones I tend to, have good feelings about. My current office is not too bad. This is a picture from the previous co-working space where I was renting a desk. And that place had a reasonable Wi-Fi. It wasn't too slow, but it used to drop all the time. And once it dropped, it took about 5 minutes for it to get back up. And then, you had your Wi-Fi for about 15 minutes, and then it would drop again. So it was sort of like whack-a-mole game. It was like, hey, am I going to be able to load this documentation page now? Can I download all the Ruby gems I need now? Or do I have to wait 5 minutes? So it was pretty terrible. And this is a picture taken at dusk in Peckham, which is obviously the best area in London. As long as you don't want any 3G signal. In fact, if you want to get away from it all and have a digital detox, Peckham is the place for you. I don't think it's just my network provider, because since I lived in Peckham, I had 2 different ones, and the same problem happens. It appears that I have the 3G connection, but websites usually don't load. It's pretty infuriating when I go to the gym and I try to play something from Spotify and it cuts out all the time. It's just bad. And not so long ago, I think maybe last year, I had to go back to the laptop I bought in 2010. It was a basic white MacBook with the plastic unibody, no solid-state drive. As you can imagine, it was extremely slow. Also, at the time, I was working on a project which required some video encoding, and the machine just about managed, but it was a nightmare. So I understand that editing video is resource-intensive, so I was cutting it some slack. But I would load up some of the news articles in the browser, and the same thing would happen. It would sound suddenly like a washing machine attempting to rinse on spin cycle, and that's just not what I expect from a website that just shows me some text. The reason why I'm telling you these stories is that I am often the target audience of people who build stuff for tech workers, for like young people who have like all the cool devices and work on cool projects. I am that person, and yet the speed of the various connections I have is not great, and the up-to-dateness of my devices is sort of more on a continuum rather than it being like a simple fact. And that's before we talk about the actual cost of downloading downloading web pages over the wire. To look at the Medium post, which was about Fiverr taking away work from good designers and reducing the value of their work. To download it, it took over 1 megabyte compressed. In the UK, if you don't have like unlimited data or all-you-can-eat data, that costs you nearly 23 pence. And when you're abroad and you wanted to look at that blog post, that cost you over £5, nearly £6. So that's pretty expensive for one blog post. Now, cost of downloading a single tweet, 435 kilobytes compressed. That's not too bad. But in the UK, that costs just nearly 9 pence, and abroad over £2. So I don't know whether the 140 characters is worth just over £2 to me, but it clearly is to people who build Twitter. Cost of downloading my blog post. This is, slightly cheating because I don't have any images in the blog post I'm referencing, but uncompressed because I never got around to setting it up because I'm a terrible developer, is about 42 kilobytes, which in the UK costs less than a pence, and abroad costs, I think I may have made a mistake here with some zeros. Anyway, it's a little bit cheaper than downloading a single tweet. So this isn't just like, I think like page load and page size are really big issues, and they introduce lots of performance problems. But there's another thing we need to talk about when it comes to performance problems, which are problems introduced by use of JavaScript. JavaScript is often, JavaScript is just not very robust in the same way that HTML and CSS are. So any JavaScript failures prevent the browser from displaying stuff correctly very frequently. And that is a problem because over-reliance on a thing that is potentially your single point of failure is never a good idea. So what kinds of problems are caused by JavaScript? Well, networks can block access to scripts, which means that your scripts won't execute at all, or the libraries that you rely on will not execute. One of the universities in America decided to save lots of money on bandwidth by blocking all ads. So they started blocking JavaScript that they thought was saving ads, and other scripts inevitably were at risk. Some networks block access too greedily and end up blocking stuff that is not meant to be blocked, but various corporate or school firewalls will affect whether your JavaScript is even available at all. Ad blockers interfere with script download and execution in the same way. Browser extensions can also interfere with script download and execution, and this is extremely hard to debug because you just don't know what the potential conditions are. There might be insufficient processing power on the device. Now, to most people, that immediately means, oh, the device is low power. This is like people who don't have great devices. Maybe I don't have to care about that. But even high-end devices might have tons of tabs open, and then the power available to the tab in which your site is running is reduced. The execution might be too slow for potentially those reasons. Your CDN might be down, or it might be serving up the wrong content, either by accident because it was configured incorrectly, or maliciously because somebody hijacked it. The browser might not have the required features for your JavaScript to actually run correctly. And the worst one of all, any single error that happens totally stops execution at all. I think last one is JavaScript is disabled by the user. Now, people often say like, oh, JavaScript is always available, like people who turn it off, like there's such a minority, I don't have to care about them, they made a choice. Gov.uk, they measured how many people have JS available in the browser. They've devised an experiment which allowed them to separate data from visitors who didn't have JS available from those who did, but for whatever reason, the JavaScript didn't actually execute. They were loading an image in HTML and using another image in a no-script tag, so they're able to compare it. 1.1% of all people didn't get any JavaScript enhancements, which for a government website means millions of people. 0.2% people had JavaScript disabled or not supported, but majority of those people who didn't get any enhancements were people who had JavaScript enabled but didn't receive it for whatever reason. So it's not that those people have made a choice like, oh, I don't want any JavaScript because, you know, I want to protect my privacy or whatever it is that people care about. But those were people who, for whatever reason, wanted enhancements potentially but didn't get them. So denying them an experience at all might mean that they won't come back because they assumed that there was something wrong with the website because they didn't turn it off deliberately. So should something work without JavaScript? I think only you can answer that question. I just want to give the last example. Bustle, a website which I assume was a content website, doesn't work at all without JavaScript. And I was wondering why that was. And I think it's because Bustle is not really a content website whose aim is like for the content to be read by people and shared and talked about. This is an advertising website. So if you don't have JavaScript enabled, like you're literally worthless to them. So in that sense, it makes sound business sense to prevent you from reading anything at all. So how do you know what you need to look out for and how to build your stuff? First of all, you need to know what your purpose is, what the purpose of the project is, and then know your audience. And that should help you then define principles that you can use to decide how to design stuff, and then you just have to stick to those principles. Thank you very much. I'm Nat, and my company is running a browser prototyping for designers course, and if you use this code, you can get a 10% discount. Thank you very much.